All right, we will go ahead and continue on. Up next, we have Owen Magill, and he is going to be speaking to us on the clean energy solution, why nuclear energy deserves more prevalence in society.
You don't pay attention to much anymore. The sky. You no longer want to pay attention to it. It just doesn't look as pretty as it once did. No sunny blue Sunday mornings to wake up to. Instead, it's more of the depressing, gray, cloudy Mondays. Why? Why didn't we stop using it sooner? Couldn't we have known that coal power plants wouldn't be beneficial? That may sound like the beginning of a dystopian novel, but in reality, it isn't too far off. Carbon dioxide is one of the many problems that faces our world. We're not sure about the full extent of its effects on the atmosphere, but we do know that carbon dioxide is not safe, and it's certainly not helping the atmosphere. What should we do? Should we stop driving our gasoline-powered vehicles? No. We should instead try to address the elephant in the room: coal. Coal power plants are responsible for about 40% of our carbon dioxide emissions, and the solution to reduce those emissions should include nuclear energy. Nuclear energy might not be perfect, but it will definitely be better than coal or other energy sources ever could be. Because of the dire need for clean energy, to protect the world we live in, we must acknowledge the extraordinary benefits of nuclear energy and make it a fundamental resource to power and defend our nation. Before I begin, I must define some terms, because nuclear energy may be an unfamiliar topic to some of you. When you hear the term, you might think of Homer Simpson or the New Chernobyl miniseries. However, neither of these examples give an accurate picture of nuclear energy. Simply put, nuclear is an energy source, like coal, solar, wind, or natural gas. Uranium-235, the fuel for nuclear reactors, produces heat through fission. The fission heats the water, which creates steam. The reactors use that steam to spin turbines, which activate an electric generator. So nuclear energy derives its power from steam. It also releases that steam to the atmosphere instead of carbon dioxide. Human-friendly H2O instead of not-so-human-friendly CO2. Another buzzword that's mentioned quite a lot in the energy field is renewable. A renewable power source of energy has an unlimited amount of fuel, while non-renewable, like coal or natural gas, has a finite amount of fuel. I mean, it's not as if coal grows on trees. Uranium is not renewable, like coal or natural gas. Another common term you'll hear is spent nuclear fuel. Also called nuclear waste, spent nuclear fuel is radioactive, but it is not at all like what you see in The Simpsons, a glowing green rod. I'll be discussing waste more shortly. To begin my speech, I'll illustrate how important nuclear energy is to the safety of our nation. I will then analyze the problems that other energy sources create. Next, I will examine the reality of nuclear waste and I will address the cost of nuclear power and new developments in the field of nuclear energy. Finally, I will connect nuclear energy to a biblical worldview. Nuclear energy is a vital resource for the United States because of the role it plays in national security. Nuclear power is employed by the Navy, and the United States Department of Defense depends on the grid to power 99% of its installations. Because of nuclear energy's reliability, the Department of Defense doesn't have to worry about having power or not. John Kanananis, author of Fuel for Thought, states that the U.S. Navy operates 83 nuclear-powered vessels, 71 submarines, 11 aircraft carrier, and a supply vessel, making ours the world's largest nuclear-powered navy. The U.S. Navy relies on nuclear power, the very same nuclear power that provides our nation with approximately 18% of its electricity. We can use the Navy as a model to expand beyond that 18%. After all, there must be some good reasons for nuclear power in our warships. So, what are those reasons? Nuclear power is efficient and safe and clean. Nuclear energy is simply the most efficient option for the Navy. The Naval History and Heritage Command website describes that nuclear energy revolutionized naval warfare because they would not have to make regular stops for fuel, like conventional vessels. Gas-powered ships need to refuel. Electric ships need to return to port to charge. In a combat scenario, this would almost be the same as retreating. Despite these benefits of nuclear energy, many are concerned about the danger to personnel and the environment. However, the U.S. Naval Nuclear Propulsion Program has strict guidelines to prevent this. According to the Naval History and Heritage Command website, these policies reduce personnel exposure to the lowest level reasonably achievable. In fact, standards of radiation exposure are more stringent than those in the civilian power industry or in other government nuclear programs. The Navy has kept radiation exposure for personnel lower than the average nuclear power plant operator, even though they work in confined spaces like submarines or aircraft carriers. Remember, too, that nuclear energy doesn't produce carbon dioxide or other pollutants. So, refueling, radiation, and air quality are not concerns. The safety and defense of our country is. Now we'll explore why nuclear should be implemented rather than other energy sources. Energy sources like coal or solar create more problems rather than they solve and are less efficient than nuclear power. Coal is simply detrimental to the environment. Nuclear power, on the other hand, produces no carbon dioxide and takes very little uranium to produce energy. For instance, the Nuclear Energy Institute claims that one uranium fuel pellet creates as much energy as 1 ton of coal, 149 gallons of oil, or 17,000 cubic feet of natural gas. You can hold such a pellet in your hand. You could hold 2 pellets in your hand. You could actually hold the energy producing equivalent of thousands of gallons of oil. Oh, sorry. Now, an egg-sized amount of uranium would provide enough power for a 72.6-year lifetime, the average human life. In order to get the same amount of power with coal, you need 88 tons, which is nearly the same as 21 elephants. Now, you can easily fit this egg-sized amount of uranium on your kitchen counter, but where in the world are you going to fit those 21 elephants of coal? The amount of fuel necessary is not the only problem. Believe it or not, coal is much more dangerous than nuclear energy. The false narrative of dangers posed by nuclear power cloud the fact that coal has already had a more detrimental effect on the environment than nuclear ever will. Brandy Jefferson at Washington University says that more than 1 million deaths were attributable to the burning of fossil fuels in 2017. More than half of those deaths were attributable to coal. Over 500,000 people died because of coal in 1 year. 500,000. Other sources of energy like solar and wind are also problematic because they require more land to operate to be able to harness the universe's natural resources. Jessica Levering, co-founder of Good Energy Collective, explains that nuclear energy takes up significantly less land than any other electricity generating technology. Additionally, because sources of wind and solar are geographically dispersed, adding large amounts of these renewables to our power grids will require more transmission lines, which are becoming increasingly difficult to site. In addition to the land usage problem, solar panels themselves contain rare or toxic metals that cannot easily be recycled. Also, the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, claims that by 2030, the United States is expected to have as much as 1 million total tons of solar panel waste. According to John Hurdle at the Yale School of the Environment, U.S. solar panels due to retire by 2030 would cover about 3,000 American football fields. In comparison, the Nuclear Energy Institute illustrates that all of the used fuel ever produced by the commercial nuclear industry since the late 1950s would cover 1 football field to the height of approximately 10 yards. Clearly, there are issues with all types of energy, but nuclear is easier to manage because it does not produce as much waste and it's especially safe. However, skeptics will point to nuclear disasters to argue their point. Many fear nuclear energy because of disasters like Chernobyl. However, other sources of energy are far more destructive. In an article from Forbes by James Conca, we see that coal has a mortality rate of 100,000 per trillion kilowatt hour worldwide, while nuclear has only 90 worldwide, and the US specifically has a rate of only 0.1. Conca even says that the reason the US death toll is so low for nuclear is our strong Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC. Even though nuclear energy is environmentally friendly, opponents of nuclear energy will often cling to the possibility of disaster, one that is lurking just around the corner, one that has the potential to destroy the environment. In an article addressing the pros and cons of nuclear energy, we learn that the wreckage of Chernobyl, pictured here, is contained inside an enormous steel and concrete tomb because it is still dangerously radioactive. The area won't be safe for human habitation for at least 20,000 years. However, when we examine the circumstances of the event with the World Nuclear Association, we learn that the Chernobyl accident in 1986 was the result of a flawed reactor design that was operated with inadequately trained personnel. Not only that, but the operators at Chernobyl were preparing for a test and had disabled the automatic shutdown mechanisms that would have prevented the fourth reactor's meltdown. When current NRC guidelines are followed, nuclear workers are properly trained, and procedures are implemented, that kind of accident is prevented. However, opponents of nuclear energy will still bring up nuclear waste as a potential issue. Once it is properly contained, spent nuclear fuel is not dangerous, and it doesn't take up a lot of land. Eric Dawson, a campaigner at Nuclear New York, reminds us that waste is a problem, but it is a small problem. As I mentioned earlier in my speech, the Nuclear Energy Institute describes that all the waste we have generated is being able to fit on a single football field. That is not a lot of land. Many are concerned that spent nuclear fuel is radioactive and would therefore damage our surroundings. Nuclear waste is not dangerous to the people or the environment when managed properly. To better understand this issue, I interviewed John Kotek, the Senior Vice President of the Nuclear Energy Institute, who has been working with nuclear energy since 1989. And for the last 2 years of the Obama administration, he was in charge of the Office of Nuclear Energy. When he was working at the Department of Energy, he worked at a facility where his office was within a couple hundred yards of a few spent fuel storage facilities. And he was fine when I interviewed him. He explained that while we don't have a final resting place for spent fuel in the United States, storing the stuff above ground in storage casks is perfectly safe. The spent fuel is stored in concrete, steel-reinforced containers that are, according to the Nuclear Energy Institute, safe enough to walk up to and touch. Unfortunately, due to some recent events like East Palestine, Ohio, it has been revealed that there may be issues with the transportation of toxic materials. The Office of Nuclear Energy reassures us, stating that the fuel is shipped in transportation casks that are designed to withstand more than 99% of vehicle accidents, including water immersion, impact, punctures, and fires. In fact, the Nuclear Energy Institute goes on to explain that after 7,000 shipments total of used fuel by the worldwide industry since 1970, there have been no harmful releases of radioactivity, injuries, or environmental damage. There are guidelines for transporting toxic waste to prevent exposure. Additionally, did you realize that we can recycle most of the spent nuclear fuel? According to the Office of Nuclear Energy, the spent fuel can be recycled to make new fuel and byproducts, because more than 90% of its potential energy still remains in the fuel, even after 5 years of operation in a reactor. The new generations of nuclear power plants will be part of the solution to help with this, incorporating built-in technology that recycles the spent fuel. Unfortunately, the cost of that new technology is always increasing, so we must look at the cost of nuclear energy. The cost of nuclear power may be high, but it is well worth it in the long run because of the lack of required maintenance and long-term reliability. Many would argue that nuclear power's benefits are simply outweighed because of its high costs. McKinley C. Olson, author of Nuclear Energy, It Costs Too Much, wrote in the 1980s that nuclear power plants operate at 80% of capacity, compared to about 65% for fossil fuel plants, which are much cheaper to build. Was he right to question whether nuclear was worth the extra expense? Perhaps not, since an updated statistic from the Office of Nuclear Energy shows that nuclear energy has by far the highest capacity factor of any other energy source, at 92.5%, with coal lagging behind at 40.2%. This means that nuclear power plants are producing maximum power, more than 92% of the time during the year. In addition to an improvement in efficiency, you also get the benefit of zero carbon output, along with little maintenance and long-term reliability. Will Witt, the author of How to Win Friends and Influence Enemies, asserts that nuclear energy requires far less maintenance than alternatives, needing work only every 1.5 to 2 years. The Department of Energy would agree with him. With reduced maintenance comes less downtime. I discussed this in my interview with John Kotek, and he said that while building costs for nuclear power plants are higher, they're relatively cost-effective to operate. So once you get one built, they actually cost comparatively little to run, and the prices are very predictable and stable over the long term. Not only this, but he said that using nuclear power saves you from having to overbuild things like wind and solar and transmission lines. Solar and wind demand extensive land use to come close to the same kind of power you get with fossil fuels, or even nuclear. Specifically, nuclear has a new technology that is safer and smaller and cheaper, that comes in the form of a small modular reactor. SMRs are much safer than regular-sized nuclear power plants because of their size and design. David Novak described these small reactors in his paper titled Bring Back Nuclear Power, that they can be made in factories and transported by truck. The cores of many SMR reactors aren't much bigger than the average office desk. Even better, he says that they contain much less radioactive material, so there's less potential for widespread contamination in the unlikely event of an accident. While they may be small, they can be easily manufactured and still provide ample power for many people. Traditional nuclear power plants can generate between 600 and 1,000 megawatts of electrical energy. SMRs generate less than 300, but that is still enough to generate power communities of up to 10,000 people for a decade. Even though they don't produce as much power as traditional reactors, the advantage of the size of the reactor overpowers the reduced output. In addition to all the benefits of nuclear energy, it helps to fulfill the creation mandate. In Genesis 1:28, God commands us to be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it. Subduing means being good stewards of God's creation. Current coal and fossil fuel plants are slowly eroding away the environment through carbon dioxide. That's not good stewardship. Robert Sokolow, contributor to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, says that carbon dioxide created by burning fossil fuels has routinely been sent to the atmosphere, where it has a potent role in driving climate. Nature holds many mysteries, but when we pump poisonous gas into the air, it lets us know. It lets us know when the climate changes and the air quality is reduced. While nuclear energy may not be the final, perfect source of energy, it is a step in the right direction, a step to stop harming God's beautiful creation, which we should protect at all costs. Now, I'm sure that after I've just given you a lot of information on nuclear energy, you might be wondering, what are we supposed to do? How can we, as citizens, support nuclear energy? I know how you feel. You're probably on the edge of your seat, just wondering. I'm here to give you an answer. Unfortunately, during my research, I was not able to find much on how to support and promote nuclear energy. So once again, I discussed this with John Kotek. He revealed that learning about what it takes to decarbonize the energy system and understanding and communicating the role that nuclear energy can play to help us get to a clean energy system is the most important way we can help more people understand why we should embrace the idea of more nuclear power in the United States. His answer may seem a bit underwhelming at first, but when you think about it, it makes sense. How are you supposed to support nuclear energy when you don't know much about it? The first step to supporting nuclear energy is to understand it. If I have not fully helped you understand nuclear, I strongly suggest that you visit the Nuclear Energy Institute's website. They were one of my main sources because they have a page on nearly everything you could want to know about nuclear energy. In a few moments, you will be able to ask me questions, but if you have more after that period, please do not hesitate to ask me. Send me an email, send me a text, send me a letter. My goal is to help you learn what nuclear power is, and I want to do that. Ultimately, in order to power and defend the United States of America, and to protect God's wonderful creation, we as citizens of this country must understand the excellent qualities of nuclear energy. And that's why nuclear energy deserves more prevalence in society. Thank you.